Good afternoon and welcome to Tuesday Talks at the White House, a weekly invitation for people around the country to engage with policy experts, administration officials, and more. The White House Fellows Program is one of America's most prestigious fellowships for leadership in public service. And with the deadline approaching for the 2011-2012 class, we're so pleased to have with us some of the experts on the White House Fellows that will be fielding your questions on the program. We have with us Cindy Moelis, the Director of the President's Commission on the White House Fellowships, Jaime Areizaga-Soto, White House Fellows Class of 2008 and Senior Attorney Advisor for the U.S. Agency for International Development, and Esther Benjamin, White House Fellow Class of 2000 and Director of the Global Operations for the United States Peace Corps. Thank you guys so much for being here. We're excited. We're going to get to your questions very soon. To introduce myself, I'm Corey Schulman in the Department of New Media, and for the past couple of days, you've been sending us lots of your questions on the Fellowships program, about their experiences on whitehouse.gov and on Facebook, and we're going to answer as many of your questions as we can. You can also join the live chat right now, where we'll be answering even more of your questions. Go to whitehouse.gov/live. There's a link to join the chat in Facebook, and I'll be scanning those throughout the duration of the chat, and we'll be answering those for the next half hour, 45 minutes. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Cindy, Esther, and Jaime for a brief introduction, and then we'll get right to your questions.
Thank you, Corey. This is a wonderful opportunity to explain the fellowship and to answer your questions. On behalf of the President's Commission on White House Fellows, I'd like to encourage everyone who is interested in public service and leadership development to go to our website and really read about the program and review the application. You can register, you can look at the application. I want to mention that it does need to be completed by January 14th, and it is time consuming, and I think Esther and Jaime will explain a little bit about how they approach the application process. I also wanted to mention the White House Fellows Program was established 45 years ago by President Johnson. It's nonpartisan. The fellows come from all sectors: medicine, science, business, law, non-for-profits. A couple of famous alumni that you may know, just General Colin Powell, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, Secretary Henry Cisneros and Elaine Chao, and Senator or Governor Sam Brownback. The goal of the program is to encourage active citizenship and to ensure that future leaders have exposure and knowledge of the public sector. We believe that future leaders are better leaders if they have exposure to the public sector. The application process is competitive. It's highly competitive, but if chosen, you're given the opportunity to come to DC and work with the current leaders of this administration. Besides your work placement, fellows are also given an opportunity to hear from leaders from all different sectors in small groups and at lunch, and as well as travel to see how federal policy affects localities. So I just want to thank Jaime and Esther for coming and sharing their expertise. And again, I encourage you to take a look, see if you're eligible, and this will be a time that we can answer some of the questions that you have.
Good afternoon. I basically had a legal career for more than 10 years before applying for the fellowship program. I was born in Puerto Rico, came here to Georgetown as an undergrad, and then did law school at Stanford. And then I had a legal career while at the same time doing National Guard duty. So for me, the reason I applied for the fellowship was I love service. I have always been attracted to public service, but I hadn't done it. So I wanted to see how is it on the inside. And it is a very competitive program, but it's worth the try. Even the application process, as you will hear, it's a very learning experience. For me, it was a life-changing experience, an awesome year. So I definitely invite you all to consider it and hopefully to apply. And I am currently a political appointee at the General Counsel's Office at the United States Agency for International Development.
Hi, I'm Esther Benjamin, as Corey said, and I currently work in the Obama administration. I'm Associate Director of the Peace Corps, responsible for global operations, and in that capacity, I oversee all of our Peace Corps programs in 80 countries around the world. This has been a wonderful experience working in this administration, and it has built on my White House Fellowship experience in many, many ways. Peace Corps is truly a life-defining leadership experience, and I'm honored to have the opportunity to provide more Americans opportunities to serve. I did the White House Fellowship in 1999-2000. As Jaime said, for me also, it was a transformative experience, a wonderful year. I encourage all of you to consider applying. Prior to becoming a White House Fellow, I worked in the private sector doing Big Five management consulting. I also worked with the United Nations coordinating humanitarian relief in Africa. And I worked in the private sector and also worked for the World Bank and the Brookings Institution on the World Bank History Project. So I came into the fellowship with international organization, private sector experience, and looked for an opportunity to understand how government truly works at the highest levels.
Excellent. Well, thank you. With that, we will jump right into your questions. There's a very active chat happening right now on Facebook. Go to whitehouse.gov/live. A lot of people are excited to apply for the program and have a lot of good questions. When you go to whitehouse.gov/live, there's a link to join the chat on Facebook, and I'm scanning all of your questions, and we will be asking them. We'll be answering as many of them as we can. So with that, I'm going to jump into a question that was submitted through whitehouse.gov earlier. This comes from Sanika Bhatnagar from Pennsylvania, who asks, what was your main motivation for applying for the White House Fellowship Program?
Well, I have always been deeply committed to public service, and I had known about the fellowship program. I knew it was a very competitive program. I had wanted to apply, but I was not a U.S. citizen for many years of my life. In the fall of 1998, I was naturalized as an American citizen. And just 3 months after becoming a citizen, I decided to apply for the fellowship, worked very diligently on the application, prepared very thoroughly, and was pleased to proceed to semifinals and to finals, and then to ultimately be selected a White House Fellow. I often tell this story because it's only in America where this kind of experience and opportunity is possible, where one can become an American citizen and just months later decide to apply for something incredibly competitive in the federal government and to be sworn in just months later by a member of the president's cabinet. So I owe a lot to the program and benefited greatly, and always tell the story as a testament to what opportunities in America can be possible through hard work.
Let me just mention, Corey, that we did get questions about citizenship, and you do have to be a citizen, and you actually cannot hold dual citizenship. If you do want to become a fellow and you get through the process, that's something that you may have to give up. So people should understand that.
Well, I was going to jump into the next question. This comes from Tiffany Ellis. This is she just asked us in the live chat on Facebook. She says, "Thank you for hosting this great program. Do you know how many people typically apply and how many people are accepted each year?"
Well, the executive order, which was enacted by President Johnson 45 years ago, actually sets limits on the number of people who could be accepted. It's between 11 and 19 every year. And the President's Commission, which is appointed by the sitting president, makes the choices of how many people are actually chosen and get appointed as fellows. This year it's 13, last year it was 15 that were selected. It ranges from year to year. It has gone as high as 3,000 over the history of the program. In the current history, it's around 1,000 qualified applicants have applied, which means that we don't count people whose applications don't make it through being completed.
Okay, this next question comes from Greg McKeown from California. Greg asks, what have you done, I think this is directed towards Jaime and Esther, what have you done since the White House Fellows that you could have not done without the experience?
Well, in my case, I'm a recent White House Fellow because I did it from 07 to 08. No, I'm in that class. I would say that in my case, having been, I was doing infrastructure finance. Indeed, I was living overseas. My law firm transferred me to Brazil, where I was working in Brazil. I would fly back for my military duty, so I knew people in the military. But the ability to come in and be a fellow from 07, 08 put me in the middle of a lot of the policymakers here in Washington, and I think that's what allowed me, as a result of the fellow later on, when the Obama administration came into office, to be able to be appointed to the administration as a political appointee. I think that is what the fellow in this short term has provided for me, is to be able to serve in this administration. I think it would have been very difficult for me to be appointed had I not done the fellowship. And I think in my case, as I'm a recent fellow, what I can tell you is I'm sure it will open a lot of opportunities in the future just because of the relations I've made with my fellow fellows and the ability that I had during that year to see the top levels of government at work and getting to meet a lot of people that I think now know me and I know them and have seen my work as a fellow when I was at the Department of the Treasury. And I think that will allow for future opportunities to serve.
It's been 10 years since I was a White House Fellow, and the program definitely has had an impact on my career and opened doors and opportunities that otherwise may not have been open to me. I spent 8 years after the fellowship working with international NGOs. I worked in nearly 100 countries around the world with the International Youth Foundation, and then subsequently with the International Partnership for Microbicides. I held Chief Financial Officer, Vice President, and Executive Director positions. And I believe that it would have been more difficult for me to step into these very, very senior leadership roles had I not been a White House Fellow. So I think the program opened up doors and allowed me to enter organizations at a much more senior level because of the experience as a fellow. I also joined the Obama administration as a senior political appointee, and I am pretty confident that my previous role as an aide to a cabinet member played a critical role in that appointment in addition to the other experiences. And on a personal level, I have to say that through the fellowship, I really formed lifelong friendships and gained access to an incredible, strong, robust network that is very helpful through every step of our professional journey.
Great. If you're just joining us, go to whitehouse.gov/live. There's a live chat that's happening right now on Facebook. We're getting a lot of great questions. On whitehouse.gov/live, you'll find a link to join the chat on Facebook, and we're answering as many of those as we can. So I'm going to turn it over to Cindy. I think this might be a rapid fire. You can answer sort of a lot of straightforward questions about the application process and additional questions about the program, but feel free to chime in. Marna Myers asks, is there an age limit to applying for the fellowship?
So when the fellowship first was enacted 45 years ago, they actually did have an age range, and it was suggested that people between 25 and 35 apply. Since that time, there's been a question about what young or emerging leaders look like and if an age range is appropriate. The age range is no longer applied to the program. I can tell you that over the last 5 years, the average age has been in the early 30s. That's just been the average age of fellows. But you should look at the application, you should review the eligibility, and you should decide if this is the point in your career that you would be a competitive candidate.
Follow up to that, Hannah Banks says, do people over 50 stand a chance of getting accepted to the program?
Once again, there is no specific age. It is a program for young leaders. It's a program to build on the potential of candidates. So really the goal is for you to tell the judges or the people who are looking at your application why you're the person that should be invested in by the federal government. These are taxpayer dollars, and the way that this program works is that we are bringing emerging leaders in and giving them another very important tool in their toolbox in order to be future leaders in many sectors. So that's the goal of the program. I'm not going to tell anyone that at a certain age you cannot apply, because that's not true. But you do have to make a case as to why you should get one of these very select spots.
And I'll say this to that point. This is a very challenging program. The moment you get in, one of the biggest challenges of this fellowship is time management. This program will consume you to the point that you will be from 7 in the morning to who knows how late going and working, because this program, you have a job that you have to perform, and then you have all these other opportunities. So time management and the time commitment of this program, it's very high. So I think you need to look at the program. If if you're at the right time in your career, pretty much it will be said later, but in my case, in most cases, you've completed your education and you've already succeeded early on in your career. So if you're at that point in your career, which you're ready to go over to the higher levels, but at that point you want to have a 1-year great experience in government, this is the program. But be aware, you will have to commit to a lot of hours, and it's not an easy experience in the sense that you'll be challenged day in and day out throughout the whole year.
We just got a question from Pam Hoffman in the live chat that's happening on Facebook. Pam asks, what surprised you the most about the program?
What surprised me the most? I don't think too many things surprised me about the program. I think building on what Jaime said, the intensity of the program couldn't be underestimated. It is a huge commitment. In terms of other aspects of the program, the work placement and the education program and policy trips, I think we had been pretty well informed about those parts of the program, so I wasn't necessarily surprised by that, but the number of hours worked and the deep commitment that it takes to succeed and complete a successful year, it is quite intense.
Okay, the next question, or a couple people have been asking this, Eileen Curis and Takeda Mason ask, does it have a salary?
Yes, it's actually a GS-14 Step 3. I won't say a number because every year there's usually step increases, so I don't want to commit to a specific number. But it is over $100,000, so it's a wage that is significant in the federal government. It puts you at a high level within the department that you're working in, and it allows you to be able to afford to live in a city like DC.
Okay, the next question, this is one that was submitted on whitehouse.gov. It comes from Kermit Jones in New York. My question pertains to the placement process within departments. How much does prior experience factor into our placement in a department or with a cabinet secretary? Are we given the opportunity to interview for specific positions?
So the way the placement works is, first of all, we encourage you to come in with the understanding that this is a public sector leadership fellowship. It is not topic-based, there is no guarantee that you will get to a department that you specifically have an expertise or have a desire to be in. Having said that, we encourage all departments to participate. As we mentioned, there is a salary and a job slot included, so departments actually have to really desire and embrace the fellowship because there is a cost to the departments. After talking to all the departments, if you do make it to be a fellow, you end up coming in July and doing an interview week with all the departments that are interested in a fellowship, having a White House fellow and participating in the program for that year. There are more departments that want fellows than that there are fellows, so it's a wonderful opportunity, but you really have to be willing to be placed in a department that wants you and feels that it's a good match for them.
I wanted to jump in and say that the fellows who are most successful really are those who come into the program with an open mind, open to serve at any department or White House office. I think it's often challenging for those who come in with a set idea in mind, and should that not work out, it becomes a challenging year. So I always recommend that candidate comes in with an open mind. My experience, for instance, is that I came in with a lot of international experience, and the Secretary of Labor wanted me to work at the Department of Labor. I was surprised by that. I had no labor experience. However, the Secretary was launching some major new international initiatives, and I went there with an open mind, and the Secretary and other senior staff and colleagues I worked with made it such a worthwhile experience. But I had no idea that I was going to be in a department that I knew very little about. So I always recommend that people come in with an open mind to serve where they're asked to serve.
Corey, I should also mention, because I think this is an important aspect, is the fellowship is really a learning experience. the actual slot that you get at wherever you're placed cannot be translated into a long-term job. It is a one-year position. So people should understand that even if they get the placement that they want, that it's over in a year. The year is for your learning, for observation, and it is actually not a program that was created to encourage you to stay in government. It's actually a program that President Johnson created to encourage you to go back to your communities and contribute in whatever sector, in whatever communities that you had been in before the fellowship. And that's a very big distinction between some other fellowships.
And if I might take that as a lead-in into the community service side. The community, I cannot underemphasize the importance of community involvement and community service. I know a lot of great candidates that have not been able to make it to the program because they were not involved in their community. So when you do your application, make sure you emphasize your activities, whether it's with churches, whether it's with the Boy Scouts, whether it's with schools. You know, the community aspect, it's a critical part of the application process. We're looking for people that are committed to serve in their communities and that will take whatever they learned during that year back to their local communities.
One thing just to note, there are a number of people in the chat that are asking how do they apply or how do they access the application. If you go to whitehouse.gov/fellows, you will find a link to the application for Jimmy Thompson and the others that were asking about this. Matthew Brodracky and Tony Crabtree that are in the Facebook chat are asking what's a typical day like for a fellow?
Wow. Well, I can say mine. I was assigned to the Department of the Treasury, and this was from 07 to 08. So you all know how our economic situation was starting to face some daunting challenges. I would start with a staff meeting at 8 in the morning every day. So I would be at the Department of the Treasury sometime around 7:30, 7:45, and get ready for that 8 o'clock staff meeting of the front office of the Department of the Treasury, where we would analyze what was going to happen that day. And sometimes there are already issues as a result of the media that you have to deal with as that early. And every day was different, to tell you the truth, but that would be a standard. Many days during the year, we had a guest speaker at the White House Fellows office at noon, so that meant that I had to do as much as I could at Treasury and then head out at 11:45 and run across the White House to the White House Fellows office for a noon meeting with a great speaker. It could be Colin Powell, Koki Roberts, Sanjay Gupta, it could be, David Petraeus, John Petraeus. It was a wide variety of leaders from the nation to speak to us, university presidents, other members of the cabinet. It was outstanding. And then I would go back to Treasury for my work in the afternoon, and then many times in the evenings, there were a variety of events. And that was a typical day that would go until late, and in between, during the year, you have some specific programs that you might have, whether it's a trip to analyze how federal policy affects local communities in Louisiana. We visited New Orleans and we met with the mayor of New Orleans and saw that too. So every day is different. It's extremely challenging because you'll have a lot of events and not only requirements but opportunities to do things, and you cannot do them all, but you got to manage your time as best you can to get the most out of it.
Great. If you're just joining us, go to whitehouse.gov/live and click the link to join the Facebook chat. We've got tons of great questions rolling in. This next one comes from Michael Futrell Similton. Very interesting question. What was the one thing that you learned about the process that everyone should know?
I would say that the process is one that really involves self-reflection. The application questions, the essay questions, really forced me, and I think this is consistent with other applicants' experience, the questions force us to think about where we've been and what our passion is and what our commitment is to, and what our goals for the future are. So it was a deeply reflective process. I think we all worked very hard on the initial application package itself, which is key. and going through the subsequent steps in the selection process, again, forces us to think pretty deeply about who we are and our goals. So that's what I would say about the process.
In my case, I would say it takes a lot of time and a lot of work. By the way, I applied 1 year and I didn't make it. I was selected on my second year, which is not uncommon. Why? Because although it's a few number of essays, you have to really think through those essays and those answers, because they will be thoroughly reviewed for their content, for your perspective, and for their quality. So you definitely, it is a time-consuming application. It's very worthwhile because you have to think of yourself, and at the end of the day, this is an offer you're making to the government to serve, and you're showing who you are and what you have to offer.
Thanks. This next question comes from Sean M. Oliver in the Facebook chat. Sean asks, how did the fellowship program allow you to help your local community?
Well, in my case, basically, it's to be able to go back to Virginia. I'm a Virginian, and to be able to take back with experiences of how the federal government works. What can it do and what it cannot do? How can it help and how it cannot help? So I went back and I became an advisor to the Senate of Virginia and at the state level in Richmond, and I was able to advise the local legislators about ways by which we could take advantage of offers and opportunities and programs the federal government has, and things where you know that it will take longer than you think to be able to get a federal answer, a federal response.
In my case, I live in the Washington, D.C. area and did so at the time of the fellowship. I work in the international affairs arena, so my community is defined probably more broadly in terms of a global community, and understanding how government works in terms of foreign policy and international programming was very critical for what I've done since then. The things that I learned through the fellowship have been incredibly helpful in making linkages, identifying additional resources and connections to improve global development programs.
This next question comes from Philip C. Ballard. Can you please discuss the policy memo portion of the application?
Sure, I can take that. That question is specifically about a memorandum, a policy memorandum to the president. And most importantly, I would say that it's important to follow instructions. I think for that essay, it's a 500-word limit. So important to follow instructions and keep to the 500 words or less. I think it's important to be very precise, very concise, important to provide background, identify the different sides of the issue, and to make a very thoughtful, intelligent, and practical policy recommendation to the president, and to really convince the president to support your recommendation or to implement your recommendation. It's important to remember that this is a memorandum to the president. It is not a memorandum to the governor or to a senator. It's to the president. So it should be an issue of interest to the president and to the executive branch of government. I also think that in the wide range of issues that you could select, it's important to select a topic that you know pretty well. There are so many topics from which you can choose, and it's really best to pick one that you know quite well and can speak to intelligently. As you go through the competition, you'll have to defend your view to many, many people, and to the extent that you can present as an expert on the topic, the better.
I agree.
The next question comes from Michael Futrell Similton, who had asked another question, but this is a good one, and it's come up a few times before. Greg McCohen from California had submitted a similar question in advance, and this is about the interview process. Michael asks, how can you provide some insight into the interview process? And Greg wanted to know how you personally prepared.
Well, basically the application package is reviewed, and around 100 to 120 are selected to go to regionals. And the regional panels, which happen in different cities throughout the country, what you will do is you'll go to 4 panels of 3 regional panelists that will interview you. And it is like a job interview. Here you are putting your package, and that's why it's so important to know your memo and to know your application in and out. Because you'll come in and you'll be receiving questions and having a dialogue by a 3-person panel for around 20 minutes, and you'll have 4 of those in one day at the regionals. And how do you prepare? You need to be at the top of the game. This is just like a job interview or a school interview when you're trying to impress that you are the best person for this program. How did I get ready? I have to tell you, I read The Economist, The New York Times, The Washington Post, and many other top-notch publications in and out for a few months as soon as I knew, and I went even back to make sure that you're up to speed at the level this is. You are coming to the highest levels of federal policy, and you need to know, at that point, you don't know what department you're going to. So you need to know all the top issues that are happening in policy and politics and international affairs at the time you come to the interview, because they might ask you about a current event issue. It might not be in your area. I'm an attorney. It could have been in science, and you have to be ready to engage intelligently, and you need to show that you are up to speed with the issues of the day.
I should just frame the 3-tier process that happens once your application is in. I think that would be helpful. And we've mentioned them, Esther and Jaime have mentioned them. The first round, after your application is completed and the office gets the application, we make sure that 3 alumni read that application. It is a paper process. So as Esther was encouraging you to be very clear and reflective on that piece of paper, that's going to be your ticket to the regionals. Mm-hmm. So out of all the applicants, if 3 alumni feel that you recommend you to move on, approximately 100 to 120 of those applicants are going to move on to the regionals. At the regional level, as Jaime has mentioned, there are 12 community leaders. So whatever city you're in, and we try to be as diverse in terms of placing you closest to the city that you're at, because you have to get yourself there. So we have cities across the country. We have 8 locations. And once you're selected as a regional, you will be then informed that you will be at a certain panel. You won't know who those community judges are. We don't share that. But they are judges from all diverse backgrounds, because you're from diverse backgrounds. So it's going to be scientists, it's going to be business people, it's going to be lawyers and doctors and people from the non-for-profit sector. So you really have to be up to speed on all these different issues. If that panel decides to recommend you into the next round, which gets down to 30 national finalists, that's your opportunity when we bring you to Washington, D.C. in June, and you meet with the President's Commission on White House Fellows. These are 28 individuals, leaders, national leaders, who have been appointed by President Obama to help him select our final fellows. And if at that point you can go on our website, you can see who our national commission is, the President's Commission is, but there are people like Senator Daschle and Senator Sarbanes. There are people like General Wes Clark and General Newton and General Kennedy. There are people from the arts sector like Maya Lin. I could keep going because every one of those commissioners in their own right is a leader in their own field. Ruth Simmons, who's the president of Brown, and Peter Henry, who's the president of NYU Business School. So you're just getting a sense of, if you get through the first tiers, the last tier is a 2.5-day interview process in which you meet the President's Commission, and you have to explain to them why you should be a fellow this year.
To follow up with that, we got a question from Dixon T. McReynolds in Arkansas through whitehouse.gov that asks, what are the evaluators looking for when they read applications and interview possible fellows? And then Derek Waliko asked a similar question in the chat, what types of references is the fellowship looking for?
Well, I'll take the first question. You can talk about a little bit about how you decided who would be your recommenders and how you went about asking them. That was probably helpful. But we actually provide each of the different reader, whether it's a reader or a regional judge or the President's Commission, we give them 5 broad areas to look at your application and to talk to you about when you come into the interview process. And I'm actually going to read them, so I'm very accurate and I try to give you a real strong sense. Within each of these 5 criteria, there are so many levels underlying them. So I know this is going to feel very broad, but I do want to give you a sense of what we ask them to look for. So it's a record of remarkable professional achievement early in one's career. It's also evidence of leadership skills and the potential for future growth. a demonstrated commitment to public service, as Jaime has mentioned, the ability to work effectively as part of a team. You're both a team at your placement and a team within the fellowship. And of course, the skills to succeed at the highest levels of the federal government. So those are the 5 very broad areas that we ask everyone looking at your application or meeting you to think about when they think about recommending you as a fellow.
And it was basically those same points that I try to emphasize through my letters of recommendation. So, for example, because I'm in the National Guard and I was activated for Katrina, I wanted to show the administration that I was, even though I was living overseas, I was to the commissioners. I mean, I was committed to public service and to community service. So I had a letter. One of my recommendations letter came from my 2-star general, who summarized my involvement in during the Katrina situation. I had because I'm an attorney, I had the partner of my law firm write a letter to address my professional achievements as a lawyer. So I think you should look at those issues and look for people that know you. A big name is okay, but I would say that the critical thing is, what do they say about you, and what can they say about your excellence in those issues that Cindy just mentioned.
I would also add, and you're right on target, Jaime, sometimes folks can pick references from the same part of your life. So I would recommend not having 3 recommenders who are academic references. I would recommend not having 3 people who have been your supervisors at different jobs. I would make sure that those are very different kinds of references. I think in my own experience, I had an academic reference from the dean of my graduate school. I had a reference from my supervisor in the position that I held before becoming a White House Fellow. I had a recommendation from a peer with whom I had done many community service projects. And I had a recommendation from a prominent individual whose name I thought, whose name and recommendation of me would mean a lot. So I think it's important to have a range of recommenders and not just pick one set type of recommendation, academic or professional.
Corey, I just want to clarify, in this application, we asked for 3, and you're limited to 3. It used to be a 3 to 5 range, it is now just 3 applications, so that was
right.
the reference to the 4th. And also, I should say, make sure people know you.
That's right.
It's really clear when you're asking somebody who has a name, has high name recognition, and they don't know you, whether it's your senator or congressman, they will give you a recommendation. The readers really do look for that personal reference. So I encourage you to make it someone who knows you well.
Okay, we just got a question from Geraldine Richards through the Facebook chat. She wants to know, many fellows have mentioned that their preparation began a year in advance. If you're interested in applying but have not yet begun preparing for the application process before now, would you recommend applying anyway?
I would. We are a month out. I guess it's January 14th, and as I indicated before, I applied 1 year, did not get selected, but 8 months later, I basically went ahead and got my package from the previous year, and that was my starting product. I said, let me go ahead and refine this. So it's never too late to start, in the sense that you have to see this as a process. It might be if, I think you can apply. It's still a month out, but it will be a lot of work. So you need to make sure that during the next 30 days, you'll be able to dedicate a sufficient amount of time, which is a pretty serious amount of time, if it's only going to be the next 30 days, but you can. It's my view.
I would wholeheartedly agree. It's not too late, but once you make that commitment to apply, it is a pretty intense effort. So make sure you set aside plenty of time to prepare your essays and to reach out to your references to get solid recommendations. So you should make a commitment as soon as possible, and know that it is a huge time commitment to get the right package together.
If I can say one thing, as an Army officer myself, I know many of my fellow soldiers and airmen are downrange. This is a program that you cannot apply if you're a full-time federal employee, but you can apply if you're in the armed forces. So for those members of the armed forces, this is a program that is open for you. And as was indicated before, Wesley Clark, Colin Powell did this program, indeed in Powell's book. He has a whole chapter on this program of how it changed his life too. So I would invite members of the armed forces to apply.
I also should mention, Corey, that that's one of the unique aspects of this program, is that there is military and civilian leaders who are involved and learning from each other as fellows, which I know Esther and Jaime both could talk about at length, but really learning from your other fellows who are in other departments and come from other sectors is part of this experience. And currently out of our class of 13, we have 4 military from all different branches with all different experiences, and it's really a truly unique experience to get to understand the military and for military personnel to have an exposure to civilian leadership as well.
Thank you. The next question comes from Brian F. O'Connor Jr., who asks, what if you had a nonlinear career progression? Example, a few years after college of military service, or sort of other types of progressions. What are you looking for as far as examples of a remarkable professional achievement?
First of all, I would encourage people with a nonlinear experience to apply, but I think each is going to be an individual question to yourself. When you look at that application, you need to sort of say to yourself, what's my story? Why did I make these choices, and what do I hope that I gained from each of your choices, and how does that take me into the future? So I really think that you should not be discouraged. There is not one model. There's not one type that becomes the fellow. And in fact, that also makes the experience amazing.
Absolutely.
Is that when you come in, you find people who have had such different experiences. Last year, we had someone who was a journalist for 8 years and then went back to law school and ended up becoming a fellow right out of law school. So really, and that's just an example of a very different model.
I think what matters is how you tell that story about why you have a range of experiences. I had classmates and other colleagues who've been in the fellowship program who were officers in the Navy and then investment bankers who were attorneys and then worked with NGOs. So many unique backgrounds. People came to the experience with many unique backgrounds, and I think it's important to be able to tell that story of why you've had those varied experiences.
Great. We have a question that's come from Jason Griffith, and a few other people are asking similar questions, like Muhammad Omar. Are incoming fellows given any special training after their selection to help with their assignment? Muhammad asks about the educational component about the program.
There's a 4-day orientation in which we actually talk a lot about what federal government means, what the rules are, and then you are brought to your placement and given a short orientation there. Primarily, the orientation is really around the fellowship and a bonding experience among the fellows. I do have to say you do not get a lot of training walking into that department. There is a lot of self-motivation that happens. We ask you to have patience when you walk into a department. You're walking into a new environment where things are already moving forward and you're a new person in that environment. So I think our goal is to encourage you to use all your skill set and all your talents and all your people skills to walk into a new environment and learn. Again, the expectation is that you're coming in to learn about public service and leadership development. You will also contribute. I know that both Jaime and Esther contribute a lot, but the expectation is that you're walking in there in order to get a truly wonderful and enriching learning experience.
I think it's very possible that from 1 month to 3 months could be spent getting oriented to the department. You have to walk in with an open mind, as I mentioned before, and really build trust and show that you can add value to the work at the agency or in the office or in an office in the White House. So the initial weeks and potentially a month or more are really about building trust and building relationships and showing how you can contribute to the work in the agency. So personally, I was less focused on the training that was being provided and much more focused on showing that I could contribute.
We have a question that's just come in from Adrian Jones about the online application process. If you submit your application and need to go back and edit it, since it's online, can you go back to edit?
You can edit it until you hit the submit button. Once you have submitted it, it is complete. You can't then pull it back. So I encourage you to be very careful, to reread your application, to do not submit it into absolutely no, it's your last version. And once submitted, you can't call the office and pull it back, even if the deadline is until January 14th.
I'll give one advice on your application. Make sure someone else reads it. You know, you're doing your story. This is your work product. This is what the reviewers are going to be reading at. Make sure you have someone else to read it and say, am I coming across? This is a story I'm trying to put forward. Is it clearly defined and sustained in this package? Feel free to do that. Make sure someone else looks at your application, because we will be reviewing it. You know, alumni will be reading it, and they'll be reading it with a lot of detail. So you want to make sure that that application has been thoroughly reviewed by you, and in my opinion, someone else too.
Great, and this is going to be our last question. We've gotten so many good questions. Thanks for everyone that's participating in the chat. This comes from Prospero Uberetta in California. What's the most difficult aspect of the fellowship year?
The most difficult aspect is basically at the time management and the challenges. Once again, this is not a side chair. You will be at the table. The people at your office, you know, the taxpayer is paying your salary. You have indicated you have succeeded in your career and you're ready to come in and learn, but contribute. So I think the challenge for me was, one, to do everything I wanted to do for my department, the Department of the Treasury, and at the same time try to take advantage of all the marvelous opportunities that we had as fellows. So that balance and making sure that you meet the expectations that you've imposed to yourself and that you know you have as a fellow employee during that year, I would say that was the biggest challenge, because you know, you just have to manage your time and everything you have to do.
There's just so much to take advantage of. There's the work placement and all the demands of the place where you're working. There's the education program. There are the policy trips. You also want to get to know your classmates. And there's the broader White House Fellows Network as well. There's so many components to the program, and I definitely found that the challenge was to truly take advantage of all of these wonderful components of the program.
I should also mention that a lot of alumni have talked about this year, and both Esther and Jaime confirm this, that it's transformational. One of the reasons it's transformational is because it's really a lot of work. You put in a lot of effort. And working for the federal government can be very challenging and can be very frustrating at times. But the wonderful thing is when you get things done, you really feel a sense of accomplishment. But I'm going to just mention that being a transformative year means that you actually are putting a lot of your own personal energy into making this year work. So we hope you'll consider looking at the application. We hope you'll apply, and we look forward to seeing you next year.
Thank you so much, Cindy, Jaime, and Esther, for joining us today. Thanks for everyone that was participating in the chat online. We will follow up and answer some of your additional questions on whitehouse.gov, so stay tuned. We got tons of great questions. To learn more about the program and to access the application, go to whitehouse.gov/fellows. Again, the application deadline is coming up on January 14th. Whitehouse.gov/fellows is the site that you want to check out. And if you joined us late, the video of this whole chat will be posted online in the next day or so. So thanks for joining us.